Marcus hadn't planned on going to the wedding at all. For 3 weeks, the ivory envelope had sat on his kitchen counter, half buried under Lily's crayon drawings and unopened bills, a polite but unmistakable reminder that his ex-wife Jennifer was marrying someone else. Someone better, she had implied, in the way that people imply things without saying them. Someone without the missed mortgage payments, the overnight work shifts, the perpetual smell of motor oil that never quite washed out from under his fingernails. But Lily was the flower girl. His 7-year-old daughter had been practicing her petal-throwing technique for 2 months. He had no choice. If you believe in kindness and second chances, hit that like button right now. Drop a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today, and subscribe to the Kindness channel, because stories like this one are exactly why we're here. Marcus was running late on the morning of the wedding, which was not unusual. He'd burned the scrambled eggs. Lily had cried because her flower girl dress had a small stain near the hem that nobody would ever notice, and the car had taken 3 reluctant turns of the key before it finally coughed to life. He was sweating through his only good shirt before he even reached the end of his street. That's when he saw her. She was sitting on the low concrete wall outside the Save-A-Lot on Clement Avenue, a woman somewhere between 50 and 70. It was genuinely difficult to tell, with silver-streaked hair and a cardboard sign balanced against her knee. She wasn't holding it up dramatically. She wasn't performing poverty for passing cars. She was just sitting there, eating a bruised apple with tremendous dignity, watching the Saturday morning world go by as if she had every right to observe it, which of course she did. Marcus drove past her. He made it exactly 4 blocks. Something, he would later describe it simply as a feeling he recognized, the particular hollow ache of being invisible to everyone around you, made him pull a slow, indecisive U-turn that nearly clipped a trash can. He drove back, parked crookedly, and lowered his window. "Excuse me," he said, because he had been raised by a mother who believed that every single human being deserved to be addressed with courtesy. "Are you doing okay?" The woman looked at him with calm, dark eyes. "I've been better," she said. "I've been worse." Her name was Eleanor. She told him this without hesitation, the way people tell you their name when they haven't been asked for it in a long time and it feels like a small act of reclaiming something. She'd been sleeping in the park 2 blocks over for 11 days, ever since the shelter had reached capacity. Before that, she'd had an apartment. Before that, a job. Before that, and here she smiled faintly, a whole life that looked nothing like this one. Marcus sat in his car for a long moment. Lily was in the back seat, watching Eleanor with the wide, uncomplicated curiosity of a child who has not yet learned to look away from discomfort. "We're going to a wedding," Lily announced. "I'm throwing petals." "That sounds like an important job," Eleanor said seriously. "It is," Lily agreed. Marcus looked at his daughter, then he looked at Eleanor. Then he did the thing that his more cautious, more practical self would have argued against for a dozen sensible reasons. "We have an extra seat," he said. "If you want to come with us, get out of the heat, have a real meal. It's open bar. And I could use someone in my corner today if I'm being honest with you." Eleanor studied him for a moment, deciding something. "You sure about that?" "Not even a little bit," Marcus said, "but I'm doing it anyway." She had nothing to change into, which presented an obvious problem, but Marcus, running on instinct and the memory of his mother telling him that generosity was never supposed to be convenient, spotted a Goodwill 3 storefronts down. They had 20 minutes. He gave Eleanor $40, told her to pick whatever she wanted, and stood outside with Lily, who used the time to practice her petal throwing in the parking lot with a precision that Marcus found both admirable and slightly intense. Eleanor emerged in a deep burgundy dress with a modest neckline and small pearl buttons down the front. She'd found low-heeled shoes in almost exactly the right size. She had combed her hair back and secured it with a clip she'd found in the dollar bin near the register. She looked, Marcus thought, like someone's beloved aunt. She looked like someone who absolutely belonged at a wedding. "How do I look?" she asked, standing in the Goodwill parking lot with the kind of quiet vulnerability that costs a great deal to show. "You look wonderful," Marcus said, and he meant it. Jennifer's wedding was held at Rosewood Manor, a venue Marcus had driven past many times without ever imagining he'd enter. There were flower arrangements the size of small trees. There was a string quartet. There were women in expensive dresses air-kissing each other with practiced warmth, and men in perfectly fitted suits who looked like they'd never burned scrambled eggs in their lives. Marcus walked in with Lily on one side and Eleanor on the other, and he told himself he was not nervous, which was a lie, but a useful one. The stares began almost immediately, not because anyone recognized Eleanor, but because there was something about her, a quality of stillness, of presence that was difficult to categorize and therefore impossible to ignore. She moved through the room with the unhurried ease of someone who had long ago stopped measuring her worth by other people's comfort levels. Jennifer noticed them during the cocktail hour. Marcus watched his ex-wife's eyes travel from him to Eleanor and back again, confusion flickering briefly across her face before her social training smoothed it away. She crossed the room with her new fiancé, a pleasant, broad-shouldered man named Derek, who had the easy confidence of someone for whom life had generally cooperated. "Marcus," Jennifer said, with the careful warmth of someone being very deliberate about being civil, "I'm glad you came." Her eyes moved to Eleanor. "Jennifer, this is Eleanor," Marcus said. "She's with me." And Eleanor, who had lived in a park for 11 days, who had eaten a bruised apple on a concrete wall 3 hours ago, who had not been introduced to anyone at a social occasion in longer than she could precisely remember, extended her hand and said, "Jennifer, you look absolutely radiant. What a beautiful day you've chosen." Jennifer blinked. Then, unexpectedly, her eyes went soft. "Thank you," she said, and meant it. Lily threw her petals with the focused intensity of a professional, and the ceremony was lovely in the way that weddings are lovely when you decide to let them be, when you choose to celebrate someone else's happiness instead of measuring it against your own losses. Marcus sat next to Eleanor in the third row and found, to his own surprise, that his chest felt lighter than it had in months. But the moment, the one that nobody at Rosewood Manor would stop talking about for weeks afterward, came at the reception. The band's lead singer fell ill between the ceremony and the first dance. She appeared from backstage looking pale and apologetic, explaining in a hoarse whisper to the wedding coordinator that she absolutely could not perform, that she was so sorry, that this had never happened before. The coordinator was quietly panicking. Jennifer looked stricken. The room buzzed with the particular uncomfortable energy of a celebration threatening to lose its momentum. Eleanor leaned over to Marcus and said very quietly, "I used to sing." He looked at her. "Professionally," she added, as if she owed him the context. "A long time ago, before everything got complicated." Marcus didn't pause long enough to overthink it. He got up, walked to the coordinator, and said 4 words, "She can do it." The coordinator looked at Eleanor. Eleanor looked at the coordinator. Something passed between them, a mutual assessment, a silent negotiation, and then the coordinator nodded with the desperate pragmatism of someone who has run out of better options. Eleanor took the microphone like she'd been holding microphones her entire life, which she had. The first note stopped every conversation in the room. She sang at last, and she sang it the way the song deserves to be sung. Not as a performance, but as a testimony, as something true rising up from a place inside her that the last several years had not managed to reach. Her voice was rich and weathered, and full of a depth that comes only from having actually survived something. It was the kind of voice that reminds people, without a single spoken word, that beauty does not require perfection, that grace does not require circumstances. Jennifer cried. Derek cried. The string quartet, who had heard a great many singers in a great many venues, exchanged a look with each other that said everything. Lily, sitting next to Marcus with her flower basket in her lap, reached over and took her father's hand. "Daddy," she whispered. "Yeah, baby. We did a good thing today." Marcus watched Eleanor standing in the warm light of Rosewood Manor, surrounded by strangers who had become, for this one strange and luminous afternoon, her audience again, and he thought about the $40, and the Goodwill parking lot, and the bruised apple, and the U-turn he'd almost not made. "Yeah," he said, squeezing his daughter's hand. "We did." After the reception, Marcus drove Eleanor to a hotel, a real one, nothing fancy but clean and safe, and paid for a week up front. She tried to argue. He wouldn't hear it. They sat in the parking lot for a few minutes before she got out of the car, and Eleanor told him that she had a daughter in Cincinnati who she'd lost contact with 3 years ago, and that maybe it was time to try again. "It's never too late," Marcus said. Eleanor looked at him for a long moment. "You're a good man," she said. "Don't let the hard parts convince you otherwise." She called her daughter the next morning. 2 weeks later, she was on a bus to Cincinnati. Marcus still has no idea how that story ended, but he likes to imagine it the way Lily imagines it, completely, happily, without reservation, because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose to believe that kindness, once sent out into the world, finds its way home. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that one small turn of the wheel, one U-turn on an ordinary Saturday morning, can change everything, please give this video a like, leave a comment below telling us where you're watching from, share it with someone who needs a little hope today, and subscribe to the Kindness channel. We'll keep bringing you stories that prove that humanity, at its best, is still something worth celebrating.